Minnesota Public Radio presents St. Paul Sunday Morning. St. Paul Sunday Morning is made possible by a major grant from the Minnesota-based General Mills Foundation, supporting excellence in education, human services, and the arts. Additional funding has been provided by the National Endowment for the Arts and by this American Public Radio station. Join us now in Studio M. Here's your host, Bill McLaughlin.
Good morning, my friends. Welcome to Studio M for St. Paul Sunday Morning. I have a group back with us today. It's one of my favorites. And I have to say, actually, the last time I've heard all of the five of you live was along the coast, little festival in Connecticut a couple summers ago. I was doing some stuff with Tony Davis. We were doing a new opera, and we were working at the Eugene O'Neill Theater Center. And one night, we'd been working so hard, I just went out and running. I was running along the coast, and I heard this sort of, I thought it was first a Salvation Army band. It sounds so beautiful, a long way off. Long way off. And then, you know, I started hearing trumpet solos and horn solos, and people were just flying around. I thought, good Lord, what is that? But it was amplified, you know, and it came probably from a mile off. As I got closer and closer, I started to hear it. And I'm looking now at Scott Hartman, the trombones. You played that Bernstein tune, A Simple Song.
All right.
And all of a sudden I recognized who it was. It was the Empire Brass. So welcome back to Studio M. It's great to see you. At that time, I wasn't dressed for a concert. I was wearing an old filthy T-shirt and running shorts. And so I looked in over the picket fence. I was afraid to announce myself. Let's meet them. We have Rolf Smedvig and Curnow, the two trumpet players.
Nice to be here.
And Eric Ruske, the new horn player. I've heard you play a little on a TV show that you did last year where you were playing with Bill Vermeulen.
Right, for Nebraska TV.
Yeah, you had played with the Cleveland Orchestra, I think, for a while.
Right, for about 3 years.
And how long have you been with Empire?
No, it's been about 6 months, I guess, now. They haven't gotten rid of me yet, so I'm still here.
Now, in fact, when I walked in, Sam Pilafian, the tuba player, said, this guy is family, this guy is the glue. This guy was...
He glues the band together.
Yeah.
He's a people person.
Yeah, that's great. So here's a hot quintet, better than ever, I think. And we're going to hear some music now of actually a very famous piece that bands play in this country a lot. It's an orchestra piece originally. Composer of Rimsky-Korsakov. And the work comes from a curious collaboration. When Korsakov was quite young, he was asked by the director of the Imperial Theater to make a ballet along with César Borodin, and Mussorgsky. And they all put together and made a piece called Mlada, which was never produced. It was to be a sort of ballet pantomime. And for some reason or another, it was never ever produced, and all the composers took the music that they contributed to the effort and used it in other cases. We'll hear now a very wonderful fanfare, The Procession of the Nobles from Mlada, music of Rimsky-Korsakov, played by the Empire Brass. This was Empire Brass playing music from 1872, music of Rimsky-Korsakov, the Procession of the Nobles from Lada. And that's a terrific arrangement of that. Who made that?
They're Rolf's arrangements, actually.
Rolf.
They're mine.
Yeah, I see you just sort of running back this to take credit for it. That we were, you know, I mean, Rimsky-Korsakov is one of the greatest orchestrators there is. And the way you write for this quintet, first of all, it sounds a lot more than 5 players. You got the horn doing fantastic things. I love this one spot where the horn and the second trumpet are in unison. That's a great color.
Yeah.
And it's not a sound of either one of the instruments. Of course, the way you play the two of them, looking now at Eric and Jeff, has a lot to do with it.
It's really well written for the horn, actually. Plays really well in the horn. It's fun to play, so it's not so hard to work out.
Yeah. We have another of your arrangements coming out. This is more music. In fact, a friend, as we mentioned, Borodin was working with Rimsky-Korsakov on this piece called Mlada. At the same time, he was at work on a big piece, his masterpiece, the opera Prince Igor, which he worked on for a couple of years, very hard, 1869 to 70, put it off, and then finally completed it, not till 1887. So it's nearly 20 years, 18 years in the making. Part of it's that Borodin, of course, was a very important doctor and scientist, and so he was busy all of those years, running 2 careers at once. And when he died in 1888, I believe it was Rimsky-Korsakov and Glazunov who kind of figured out how Prince Igor should sound for orchestra. It's a famous story that Glazunov actually wrote down the overture from memory, from hearing Borodin improvise it at the piano. It never was scored.
Yeah.
And that beautiful overture is only alive today because they had no tape recorder, because Glazunov heard Borodin play it and had such a memory that he could get it down on paper.
Mackerel.
I'm feeling feeble.
Don't feel feeble, just play for us. We have some music now of Borodin. Probably the most famous music of this, the Pilafian dances from Prince Igor. It's music, once again, of Borodin with the Empire Brass. lovely music of Borodin. This is music of Prince Igor, his great opera. Anyone who's thinking that it might have musical called Kismet is also right, because they took all of Borodin's music, not only from Prince Igor, but from the string quartet and a lot of the other writing, and sort of made a lovely musical of that. This was the Empire Brass and Rolf Smedvig's arrangement. Rolf is the principal trumpet player. Yeah, that's great and colorful. It's great to hear that on brass instruments. Fantastic. You have now some Spanish music that'll be coming up, and here's where I'm starting to think that I'm kind of curious. Rolf, does your father write music too?
Yes, absolutely.
He does, because these are his arrangements now that we're going to hear.
These next couple are his arrangements. I heard some wonderful recording of Alicia Della Rocca playing these pieces on piano. And I wrote home and I said, Dad, could you do a couple of these arrangements? So he sent about 15 about a week later. So we have about 15 of these Spanish pieces which transcribe perfectly from 5 or 10 fingers to 10 lips.
I never thought about, brass quintet is, I can count, that's right. It's a little scary, but we won't ask how many personalities in the Empire Quintet. I think we'll just
Especially with the new French horn player.
But you grew up in Seattle. So your father is obviously a musician. Is he a teacher there as well?
Yeah, he taught junior high school music. And he's a poor little immigrant from Norway. And he came over on the boat when he was a teenager and moved to Seattle. Daddy worked for the Boeing company, and he's been writing ever since.
No kidding.
Yeah.
So we'll have music now of Joaquin Turina, who was born in 1882, the same year as Stravinsky. Turina was born in the south, in Seville. Then he spent some time in Madrid. Finally went to Paris around, I think, 1905 or 6 or 7, somewhere around there. He was there at the same time as Falla. They were studying at the Schola Cantorum, and they picked up not so much the conservative style of being brought about there, but actually what they were most interested in was what Debussy and Ravel were doing. So they made sort of a Spanish impressionism for themselves. Here now, arrangement for brass quintet, 2 pieces of Joaquin Turina, La Florista and Segadilla. This is music from the South. People always said that of Torina that he really never left Seville, even though he spent most of his time in Madrid. This is Segadia. Before that, we heard La Florista. Two arrangements of music of Joaquin Torina. These arrangements made by the father of our trumpet player today, Rolf Smedvig. And I'm saying now that we have music by another couple of composers that are also well known to you lads. In fact, two of you, there are only two original members now of the Empire Quintet. Is that right, Sam?
That's right.
You and Rolf, the trumpet player. Sam's the tuba player.
That's right. The original group stayed together for a very long time, and then we really started traveling a lot. Mm-hmm. And it's curious to me that the only two surviving members of the Empire Brass, one is a direct descendant of a Viking, and the other one is a direct descendant of a nomadic gypsy. And it makes sense, because that's what we do now for a living.
Yeah. You met at Tanglewood, I think, the bunch of you. Just to sort of recap your history a little, you were all pupils at Tanglewood, which is, of course, the music school connected with the Boston Symphony Summer Project.
And our start was connected to Leonard Bernstein and Michael Tilson Thomas. And Bernstein was the conductor the very first week of the school. And Rolf came from Seattle. I came from Miami, Florida. And I absolutely would never have met if it wasn't for the Tanglewood School, because that's about the longest flight in America would be going from Miami to Seattle to hook up with each other.
Yeah.
So we're sitting there, we're doing Bruckner Ninth Symphony with a great, great conductor, and Bernstein stopped and he started talking about the similarity of this particular brass section. The way they played was the same, and we ended up getting formed into a student group to play some contemporary music, and we've been doing it ever since. And way back, at the very beginning, Rolf asked Leonard Bernstein to write us a piece because we were going to be serious and we were going to stick together. And I think he thought, yeah, sure, you're going to stick together just like all chamber music groups stick together for another 3 weeks, you know. But in the beginning of 1990, we were handed a piece almost 20 years later. And it's 5 movements in length, and it was written for the 50th anniversary of American Ballet Theater. And I used to work there. I met my wife there, as a matter of fact. It's a very fond memory, the 8 years I spent there. And each movement depicts one of the historically important people in the 50-year history of ballet theater, which became American Ballet Theater later on.
Yeah. Actually, I have them right in front of me. Anthony Tudor is the dedicatee of the first piece. There's a waltz fragments to Mill, music for Misha Baryshnikov, for Balanchine, and for Jerry Robbins are the 5 pieces. Each movement is dedicated to one of these. And I think they're all people with whom the Bernsteins had some connection.
That's very true. And he captured in these very short movements something about their style. Be they a dancer, it was something about their time signature. And you'll notice that. Like in the Agnes de Mille, that's real rodeo, Appalachian Spring kind of a thing, that a flavor. And then there's a curious Russian-esque 5/8 for the Baryshnikov movement. And the Jerome Robbins is the jazzy one. You know, I mean, the personalities really are captured in these short movements.
Great. I can't wait to hear it. This will be the first time for me. From the Empire Brass, we're going to be hearing a brand new piece of Leonard Bernstein, the Dance Suite for Brass Quintet, in 5 movements. I love that piece. New music. It's a piece of Leonard Bernstein, the Dance Suite for Brass Quintet. It was written for the Empire Brass. We just heard them play it. The 5 movements, I'll give you their titles. They're cute. Danzica for Anthony, that's Anthony Tudor. Waltz for Agnes, that's Agnes de Mille. Bai Tango for Misha, that's Baryshnikov. Two-step for Mr. B, that being Balanchine. And MTV for Jerry, that being Jerome Robbins. They're great. They're cute pieces. They're more than cute, but that, just at the end, it's always like it just throws it off, doesn't it? Anyone at home was wondering if you got some funny clicking going on the reception.
Well,
It's valves a little. It's funny, all the sounds that brass instruments make. But one of the ones I was noticing, just because I put on the headset, just to be absolutely certain I was hearing the same thing as the folks at home, is that as you put the mutes in, because we're mic'd now, just as if we were in your living room. I'm talking now to you folks at home. The people will seem as if we're standing 4 or 5 feet away from you, no more than that. And you hear this little click just as, it's something you don't hear in a concert hall. It's something that musicians hear all the time, and when you see it, you don't think about it. But I was just imagining somebody saying, wow, you know, what kind of interference is that? Jeffrey, you have a whole string of things you've been playing. I wonder if you might play us a few of these sounds, just so when the people are hearing these mutes come in and out. Let's see, you've got a cup and a straight, and looks like a Hartman. Why don't you give us a taste of each one?
Yeah. Straight mute was used in the last piece. A normal trumpet sound. Is it going to pick up from here?
Yeah, it'd be fine.
Okay.
Take the mute out. Take the mute out.
You see how these guys get along so well?
Right,
This is a great insult in brass terms.
I love these guys. Now, when you put the mute in, it makes the trumpet sound as if it's off in the distance.
Right.
Now, that's called a straight mute.
Uh-huh.
Then you've got the cup mute, which kind of muffles the sound, makes the sound a little more like jazzy, you know.
Mm.
And then you've got the infamous wah-wah mute, which probably sound funny to the listeners at home.
You can play it as well without using the wah-wah effect, right? You can play that.
Sure, yeah. You can actually pull the stem out,
Uh-huh.
and you get that Miles Davis kind of.
Right, I was thinking kind of blue.
So,
Take it out, baby. One of the things that's great about that sound is that you can, without making very much volume, and it still has the effect of somebody playing very hard. I'm thinking a lot of the recordings that Miles made for a long time, it sounds like he's just playing at the top of his volume.
Yeah.
But you don't hear that much. It's one of the great ways of kind of getting this tension that comes from the control.
oh yeah, it's a terrific effect. It's really a very subtle jazz effect. It sounds a lot like a human voice in a lot of ways.
Yeah. If you've just tuned in this morning, I'll take a moment to remind you that we're spending this morning with the Empire Brass, and that you're tuned in to St. Paul Sunday Morning. Well, Sam, you mentioned Bernstein is somebody that we're working with at Tanglewood. This next piece, Michael Tilson Thomas, he would have been someone who was around Tanglewood some of that same time because he was connected with the Boston Symphony.
He was a fellow student, and his most important summer was when we started the Empire Brass. He got a chance to show his talent, and they made him the assistant conductor of the Boston Symphony at the end of the summer season. Mm-hmm. The most coveted prize for the conducting students there is to win the Kusevitsky Prize, but he won the Kusevitsky Prize, I guess, with honors because they hired him at the end of all of that. And we knew that he kept a sketchbook and that he was trying to compose, because I think principally his main music teacher was Ingolf Dahl at USC, and I think he was pushing him to compose. So 18 summers ago, we asked him to write us a piece, and we finally got this one about a year and a half ago. It's called Street Songs, and it actually is some melodies that were derived from our summers together at Tanglewood. It's called Street Song because there's a dormitory and a 1-mile walk to the Tanglewood campus, and he would figure out these melodies and sketch them into a book on his way to conducting class every day. So he went back 18 years, or 17 years, I guess it was, to this time and found some of these melodies, took 3 of the melodies and sketched them together into a piece. Mm-hmm. And we're going to play the concert version of this piece today. It's in one movement, and he blends to the point where at the end all 3 melodies are occurring simultaneously.
Great. This is also new music for me. Music of Michael Tilson Thomas, of course, known as an extremely distinguished conductor. We're going to hear now a piece of his called Street Song, written for the Empire Brass. like the music very much. First time I've heard it. This is music of Michael Tilson Thomas, of course, is very well known as a conductor. This is a piece called Street Song, which he composed in 1988. Going back to some sketches he made in a notebook when he was a student at Tanglewood nearly 20 years before, when he was a student, in fact, at the same time as Rolf Smedvig and Sam Pilafian, who were both in the Tanglewood Orchestra at that time. A piece written for the Empire Quintet. It sounds just fantastic. It's an interesting piece. It's also an interesting key, very F sharp, largely. Right. Which is not a key that suggests itself to most brass players. I mean, you guys play it beautifully in tune, and it sounds great. I think people should do it more.
There's a funny reason why this piece ends on this F sharp major chord. There's a famous early brass piece, Victor Ewald Symphony for Brass, or Brass Quintet No. 1, and then the end of the second movement, it ends on a G flat major chord. And when this group first started, we had a lot of coachings in our first years from Michael whenever he was in Boston. He coached that piece, and he thought that that was the best stack of notes and the most ringing of chords he'd heard in the quintet literature up to that point. And 15 years later, he built a piece from the back to the front, by ending with that chord that he really loved.
That final sonority.
From that, or piece from the about turn of the century, let's say.
Yeah.
And then he goes back from there and builds a whole piece.
I never thought of it. Sorry, I played the Evolve piece. I never thought about putting it together that way. It's great. Lovely piece. Music of Michael Tilson Thomas. Tell us a little bit about what you all have been doing. You've been doing a lot of recording, for one thing, since I've seen you last.
Now 5 new records.
Wow.
And we've got 2 more. One we're doing next week, as a matter of fact, a Baroque and Renaissance record. Some music that we're going to play for you later on the show today. And then later in September, we're going to do another recording of music of Duke Ellington. Also some music that we're going to do later on this particular show. But we're absolutely thrilled to be with Telarc now. We feel that they're really just quality recording, and the people there at the company that we work with are just, they're wonderful.
Yeah. What sort of repertoire have you had in these 5 discs that you made?
The first one was actually music of Gershwin and Bernstein, and the Michael Tilson Thomas piece, which is his Opus 1. Following that, we did music of Gabrielli, where we augmented the Empire Brass with members of the Boston Symphony, playing all different kinds of canzonas from 1512, 1697. Is that the right date?
That's the right millennium. Yeah, it was on the same planet within 100 years. Same planet within 100 years. Good. 1597 to 1612.
That's it. That's it.
Right around in there, you know.
It's a good thing I play the trumpet, huh?
I think it's a great thing you play the trumpet.
We have to count to 5 in this next piece, Ralph.
That's right.
I don't think I can do that one.
He's got impeccable rhythm. He doesn't need to count out loud. It's fine. Yeah, well, actually, I've seen that. I haven't had a chance to hear it. It was a fun playing with the Boston Symphony guys. I mean, you know them. In fact, one of them.
It was like going home.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a very harmonious kind of 3-day session where everybody got along, everybody knew each other. Yeah. You know, we've been working together for years.
Scott, was that the first time you'd worked with the Boston Symphony players? Because you were from Eastman, as I remember, and sort of like from a different school.
Yeah. Well, I infiltrated that school coming through into this group, and we played with them several times. We did a brass spectacular actually back in Tanglewood with the Boston Symphony Brass, ourselves, and the Canadian Brass, and that was probably the first time I played under Sage Egan with the Boston people.
Yeah. I mean, you play so beautifully. I think you'd fit in no matter what the circumstances. Everything from sort of gut bucket trombone playing to Brahms first. I think you'd sound fantastic.
You gotta make a living.
That's a point. We have another piece by an American composer. We do have some Renaissance music coming up and some Baroque music after that. But let's get to the piece of Alvin Etler, who may not be a name known widely to the American public. He's actually a very good composer. He was born in 1913 in Battle Creek, Iowa. I didn't know that. I just had to look this up in Grove. Oboist, he played for a while with the Indianapolis Symphony, went to Yale for a while, studied with Hindemith while he was also conducted the university band, and became full-time professor. He taught at Smith College for a long time, which is where he was living when he wrote this brass quintet. It was from the middle 60s, 1963, I think. And you're going to give us one movement of the Alvin Etler Quintet. What should we look for in it?
Based on Morse code. His son was killed in the Vietnam War, and this particular piece is based on Morse code. You'll hear Morse code throughout. And the whole motive is based on the first 3 bars of the piece. And you'll hear this figure and rhythm throughout the piece.
So sort of dispatches from the front then.
Morse code. That's it.
Huh. Let's get to hear it now. Music of Alvin Etler, Quintet for Brass Instruments. We'll hear the second movement. This will be played by Empire Brass. Second movement of a brass quintet of Alvin Etler, played for us by the Empire Brass. Yeah, it's an amazing thing. It's feels 12 tone. I don't know if that's actually the method of its composition, but it's also very jazzy at the same time. It takes that Morse code rhythm that Rolf was talking about, and stretches it and bends it and has everything sort of fly in and out against it. It's almost as if it's being improvised in a way. Strong jazz feel. I'd say we'd have a little bit of earlier music. We're going to turn now back to music of Anthony Holborn, who's a composer of Elizabethan England. We don't know very much about Anthony's antecedents. We know that he died somewhere around the end of November, beginning of December of 1602, because there's some mention of his wife and a pension made over to her. John Dallin called him a gentleman usher to Queen Elizabeth, but most of what we know about him is what other people have said. He was remarkably close-mouthed about his own career, collected a lot of music, and published a good deal. And what we're going to hear now is from a collection from 1599, right at the end of his life, a collection of pavans, airs, and alamans. We're going to hear now an alaman, pavan, and gigue. This is music of Anthony Holborn. great. It's music of Anthony Holborn now, an Alaman Pavan and Gigue from his set of pieces published in 1599. Heard it played by the Empire Brass. Boy, that stuff really pops. It's wonderful. That last movement, just madness almost in a way. It's just there's a trick there called hemiola where he sort of shifts back and forth from like boom, 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 dong, dong, and it like jumps the tempo along. And I was watching a bunch of you take such glee in these things. It's almost like egging each other on.
Actually, that started as one jig, and what you just heard, we took 3 jigs and put them all together. We had so much fun in that part of the piece, and now it's 3. Maybe the next time we come back, we'll be doing 8 jigs.
Dance till you drop.
That's right. This is the ideal brass quintet wedding band.
Renaissance rock and roll.
That's right. That's great.
It's busy trying to watch our feet go up and down.
That's right.
They don't work together. Yeah.
That's because I'm always lost.
Let's take a moment in case anyone's lost on the dial. You're really not. This is really a St. Paul Sunday morning. We're spending the morning with the Empire Brass. We have music now a little later. This may be from that same album of Baroque music. I don't know. This is a music of Bach from one of my favorite pieces, actually, small pieces, the Viola da Gamba sonatas. He wrote a set of them. We were talking there about early about how much music is 3, 4, 5 parts, what it comes down to. I remember talking with Leonard Rose, who recorded these with Glenn Gould, and there's a sort of continuo line which Gould played at the piano, and this is unusual in Bach's case because a lot of times he would simply write out the left-hand part sort of to go along with the solo cello. In the case of these sonatas, he wrote another part for the right hand, and Gould insisted on recording them separately for a while. I think Leonard finally got them in the last recording. I think what you hear on that is a fabulous recording. You probably know it. Was a simple performance where they just played all at the same time. But for a while, Gould would record one hand with Leonard Rose and then another hand with Leonard Rose and try to fit all of this together. I think
Talking eccentric.
Yeah.
Gould was eccentric, but he was also eccentric of incredible genius. And what he was after is he wanted to have such character, and it's almost like no human being could have a personality that far split. Yeah. So I think in a way, playing this with a number of players will be wonderful because it'll give you the room. And if there's any kind of split personality quintet you want to hear, it's the Empire. Let's get straight to it before I get into more trouble. We're going to hear 3 movements now of the second Viola da Gamba sonata, music of Bach. We're hearing it now by the Empire Brass. nice sound. This is music of J.S. Bach, the G major Viola da Gamba sonata. We just heard it played by the Empire Brass. That middle movement is wonderful. That's a trio there for horn, trombone, and tuba. It was Eric Ruske, Scott Hartman, and J. Samuel Pilafian there. We heard. For someone who's just escaped from the Cleveland Orchestra, what's it feel like to be playing all these notes on the horn, Eric?
Actually feels great. I mean, it's like playing notes. I mean, it's not like playing notes. It's so much different from playing in an orchestra.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, for the first time, you really feel like you're making a contribution to something.
Instead of just a small part of it, you're doing, it's always, what, I mean, there's barely a spot where you take the horn away from your lips during that.
Yeah, I suppose.
Yeah,
I mean, but, you know, it's actually a lot easier than playing in an orchestra for just that reason. Because, you know, you're always playing and you don't sit there and wait for a movement and a half for one 4-bar solo. I mean, you're playing all the time, so you don't have time to think about it.
Yeah, I suppose when people go to watch an orchestra concert, they don't think of that very much. I mean, they may watch say, a cymbal player in Bruckner 8th, wait, or 9th symphony, you know, just wait for that 1 spot. 7th symphony is the one I'm spotting where he has one note.
Right.
The whole bloody 80-minute piece. But you don't think about how hard it is to come in and play beautifully just at that spot.
Right. Oh, it's really tough. I think that's, in some ways, it's a lot more difficult. I mean, it's a different kind of difficulty for me.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know about the rest of the guys, but...
And you don't care.
Yeah, great, thanks.
Yeah, actually, the other four, you've all been playing, well, with Sam and Rolf, you've been playing the quintet for the longest, but even with Scott, I suppose you're the next most recent, are you?
Finishing up 6 years.
Yeah, so, I mean, by that time, it just must get to be second nature. There's a terrific physical endurance problem of doing as much playing. You boys don't seem to feel that, or you don't show that. I'm sure you must feel it, but it must be that you're in such good shape and playing so constantly all the time that...
Sunday morning's our favorite time to play.
I can't blame you. You just sort of wipe those cobwebs off the bell and wind it up, and there we go.
Beginning of a new week.
Yeah.
We're starting fresh.
That's right. It doesn't matter what the contract says, even if you played late last night. I'm thinking of Sam, who has playing probably the composer of the world's greatest bass lines in that last piece.
It's fantastic, isn't it?
Yeah.
It lays credence to the fact that most listeners hear the bass line second, right after the melody.
Mm-hmm.
And most people in America think of rock and roll bass lines, like they can sing a rock and roll bass line to just about any famous tune that becomes a rock and roll classic. But the fact is, Bach is one of the ones who really put some bass lines down on paper that are so melodic and so important. You can feel yourself pressurizing the rest of the players to perform while leading yourself through this bass line. I mean, it creates crescendos and diminuendos that were never in the music, but it's just there in the notes. You play the notes and it makes the music go up and down emotionally. It's incredible, incredible bass lines.
You're speaking of rock and roll, but we're going to get some Ellington tunes now. And I imagine, speaking of bass lines, that's what I was thinking. We'll be hearing a little bit of that. It's a funny thing with the Ellington band. He was so generous, and the sort of a band worked, I think, a little bit the way the Empire Brass does. Is it was a collective ensemble. People pitched in, and I have a line here about Billy Strayhorn. This is from the New Grove. He says about Strayhorn's collaboration with Ellington. He said the two men were so attuned to one another musically, and Strayhorn's work such a perfect complement to Ellington's. Impossible to tell who wrote what. I mean, there are tunes that they co-wrote. And of the three pieces I'm going to hear now, there were two of his collaborators on there. The first is Juan Tizal, who was a trombonist himself. He's an old valve trombonist, I believe. It's a classic called Caravan. Then you said an arrangement of a piece I don't know called Boy Meets Horn. What is that?
Boy Meets Horn is from one of the golden eras of the Duke Ellington Band, 1938, and it was one of the places where we heard all those fantastic mute sounds that Jeff demonstrated earlier in the show. We're going to hear a lot of those sounds used by the Ellington Band, and that band had instrumentalists that were talking on the instruments, and through use of mutes and pieces like Boy Meets Horn, this featured Cootie Williams and some other famous trumpet players, and of course we have it all over the band. We have trumpets on the tuba, trumpets on the French horn, and trombone also, solos everywhere. And the final piece is a Strayhorn attributed tune, Take the A Train.
Great. So this is our close of our program now. We'll give you three great tunes from the Duke Ellington era: Caravan, Boy Meets Horn, and Take the A Train. Here's the Empire Brass. Absolutely, that big band sounds. Only 5 players, but as they pointed out, they have 10 lips. This is the Empire Brass. We just heard 3 tunes from the Ellington band there. In order, we heard Caravan, with an absolutely wonderful trombone solo there of Scott Hartman. Boy Meets Horn, that was Sam Pilafian's arrangement. And finally, of course, Take the A Train, the old Billy Strayhorn theme tune, really. The Ellington band used that as a theme for years, didn't they, on the radio and all. Well, you all sound fantastic. It's nice. I think it's 3 years now since the last time we've actually met in this studio. We've got one new player, Eric Ruske, the horn player. It's nice to have a chance to meet you, Eric. I heard you play a little bit on the television, actually, that brass show that you did a year ago. And the other 4, it's great to see you and hear you again. You just sound better and better each time. I was just thinking now, looking at Rolf and Sam, when you met at Tango, it would have been impossible, I think, to see this far into the future. And you were saying that Bernstein thought perhaps you'd stay together in a good 3 or 4 weeks.
Yeah, that's right.
All that period of time now, and you've really created a standard, I think, for brass playing all over the world. People are absolutely, the word empire is tops. is by me. It is with all of our listeners, too. I think that you see some of the mail that they send us. And you're also hot on the Mr. Rogers show, I heard. Scott was telling me that you got 2-year-old fans who've seen some of the replays of the time that you were on there. And these kids weren't born when you did that show. It's nice the way that sort of stays around. It's a great gift. It's a gift that you all make to come to the studio for us today. Thanks, all of you.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, come back again as soon as you get a chance. And all my friends, thanks for tuning in with the Empire Brass this morning. It's a great show. Come join us again. We'll be back next week with St. Paul Sunday Morning.
St. Paul Sunday Morning is made possible by a major grant from the Minnesota-based General Mills Foundation, supporting excellence in education, human services, and the arts. Additional funding has been provided by the National Endowment for the Arts and by this American public radio station. St. Paul Sunday Morning is produced by Minnesota Public Radio in the Maud Moon Weyerhaeuser Music Studio. Your host for the series is Bill McLaughlin. The producer is Mary Lee, with assistance from Vaughn Ormseth. The music producer is Steve Barnett, and the technical director is Tom Mudge, with assistance from Craig Thorson and Paul Barron. St. Paul Sunday Morning was created for radio by Tom Vagley. This is Jim Lawless.